All right, so I'm going to start going through, well, actually, first I'm going to clone down this solution just so I make sure I have everything completely up to date. So I'm just using the link that I slacked out to you guys. Nope, I'm going to use this link that I slacked out just to download this 3.0.1. Oh, this is the solution for like everything. Never mind. I'm going to go back to what I was before. All right, well, in that case, I guess I'll just go through and I'll add in all of this show stuff myself. So let's see. I have the factory in there. I have the index controller. I'm also going to need a show controller. So I'll put that in. I have a state for showing grumbles. That's good. I'm going to make sure that index.html has links to all of the grumbles. And it doesn't yet, so I'm going to put in a link with sref, grumble show. Refresh, make sure I'm doing it okay so far. All right, it's throwing an error at me because it's saying that I don't have a show controller, which I don't. So I'll make that in a second. You guys all saw this order by thing. That's something that we hadn't seen before. So this is super handy because otherwise all of your grumbles are going to get added to the bottom. And when you have a whole bunch of grumbles, that's just going to be annoying to look at. So here it makes sure all the new grumbles that you create are going to be added at the start. So there's that thing. And I'm just going to save, refresh, make sure that I'm still in the right order. And I am. OK, so now I can create a show controller. So right now I'm pretty much just copying and pasting from here just so we can get to the next step of the lesson plan. Hopefully you guys did the same thing and we'll be all caught up by the end of this point. So let's see, what all does the show controller do? It uses the get from the Grumble factory, so it uses the resources.get method to get a specific grumble based on the ID that's been passed into the URL. So first I'm going to make sure it works. Then I'm going to, it works. Then I'm going to do something kind of weird with it. So if I go here, let's see what I see. This is a grumble. That's because I need to update the show view. So let's see. I think I can just do grumble show. What do I call it? So this is the one thing that isn't in the lesson plan, is adding in the controller and the controller as in here. Grumble, show, view, model. Remember, they don't need to be called these things. We're just being super explicit in this lesson plan so that you have something to go back and look at later on. Okay, so now I'm going to want to get this grumble show view model and then do .grumble.title. I think that should be it. Refresh, go back, and now I should see something about wearing shoes. There we go. Okay, awesome. One thing I do want to point out, right now we have this ID parameter in the URL written as :ID. Let me change that to, well, I'm just going to use my favorite word. I'm just going to use wombat because I can never think of anything else. If I change this to wombat here, then I'm also going to need to change this to wombat. And let's see, I'm also going to need to change my index.html. This is also going to need to be wombat. I think that's it. I don't know, we'll find out. Okay, so far so good. I missed one. I missed a wombat. Oh, and I think I know what it is. So this is actually ID. I got my wombat and my ID mixed up. Now I think this should work just fine. There we go. So I'm demonstrating that just to show that this doesn't have to be called ID. It can be called anything that you want it to be, but it's an ID, so we may as well just call it an ID. So I'm going to put it back to the way it was before, get rid of all the wombats. And there we go. And does it still work? It still works. Excellent. Okay, so the next step in here is actually creating stuff. So this is cool because it's actually putting stuff in the database. It's not just us, creating fake grumbles anymore that disappear whenever you refresh the page. The idea is that these will persist. So when you refresh the page, they're still there. So for this one, I'm creating a new grumble root. And it's going to follow the exact same format as everything else that we did. So let's see. I'm going to put in .state grumble new. Another thing that could be called whatever we want it to be called, but grumble new just sort of makes sense because that's what it's doing. /grumbles/new. And then I'm going to need a template. I don't have one yet, but I have a pretty good idea that I'm just going to be calling it new.html, so I'll just put that in there for right now. And then if this follows the same naming convention that we did everywhere before, then this is going to be called grumble new controller, and this will be grumble new view model. Yeah, ooh, that's a mouthful. So grumble new view model. Let me select that out so you guys have all of this. Make sure you delete this last semicolon. If you leave this semicolon in here, then it's not going to work. So make sure you don't have a semicolon in there. All of these states are just getting chained right together. So that's the last bit that you should add on. And now I'm going to create a new.html that doesn't even have anything inside it. I'm just going to put it in there so I can test whether or not it works. This is working. Refresh. And now, if everything went according to plan, if I go to /grumbles/new, I should see this is working. Moment of truth. I do not. Fantastic. Oh. Anyone know why that's not working? Brennan?
Can you not go to /new like in the URL?
No, you can. That's not it. I forgot something. Tim? No? No, something else. Something I did not do. Right. What, here? Oh, well, that's true. Good call. Yes, that is actually definitely one thing that's wrong, but I think it's still going to throw an error. So there's one more thing that I'm forgetting. So, yeah, I haven't made the controller yet. So I'm trying to call this grumble new controller yet, but I haven't made grumble new controller yet. So that would be our next step. I'm going to create new.controller.js. And controllers all look pretty much the same. So I'm just going to copy over this show controller. I'm just going to put it in here. And then I'll change everything that says show to new. All right. Now, do we need state params in here? If I'm asking, then that's a pretty good indicator that we don't, but why? Elise, we made brief eye contact, so now I'm going to call on you.
Well, we're not grabbing anything by ID, we don't need anything again, so we're just going to new one, it's going to create an ID once it's created, but we don't need any grab.
Exactly. Yeah, there's nothing in the URL. There's no ID in the URL, so we don't need this whole state params thing. So I can get rid of that. This should be grumble new controller function. Okay. And so we're not going to do this.grumble. We're not actually getting a grumble here. What are we going to do here? We're going to create one that does something like, I'll just put in a blank object. Why are you still trying to get stuff from the API? Oh, well, No, oh yeah, that would definitely help if I put the new controller in there. It's still trying to get stuff from grumble/new, so I must be forgetting something. And I actually don't know what the answer is here, if that wasn't obvious. Let's see. Dump the new controller. That looks fine. So why are you trying to get stuff? I don't have new after an ID in here.
Well, but it comes line.
But it's hitting the state that needs it could be new is to be referenced as an ID because it's hitting the
Good point. Yeah, let's try that.
it's not mine.
Don't tell me I'm gonna live my life. All right, here we go. Let's see if that fixed it. Yes, that was it. Genius. So the problem was, what's going on in here, when we had this before, what Angular is looking for is any URL that matches /grumbles/something. It doesn't know that that something has to be a number. It just should be something. We were going to /grumbles/new. So Angular was like, oh, all right, cool. So here's a URL that matches /grumbles/something. So I'm going to save the string new into this ID variable. Obviously, we don't have a grumble with the ID of new. So since Angular reads these states in the order in which they're written, if we want something to explicitly match /new, then we have to put it before this ID right there. As soon as Angular gets a root that matches, it's going to stop and be like, oh, sweet, that's the root. So we need to make sure /new comes before the ID. Very well spotted. Thank you so much. And now I have this whole this is working thing, which is fantastic. Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah.
After 1 year,
Hey, man. Don't. Yeah, no, don't overestimate me. Maybe I wouldn't. Okay, so we're doing things a little bit out of order here. So this.grumble, this is going to be a new grumble factory. Remember, grumble factory, what it returns is actually a resource. So now we're saying, okay, this grumble should be a new resource. So this is all I'm going to set up for the new controller right now. We'll put in the actual create thing in just a little bit. And now I'm just going to put in this chunk of HTML and trust that it's correct. So let me slack it out. I sort of glossed over that last step, I'm sorry. This is important, making sure you have this.grumble equals new grumble factory. So after I put all this stuff in here, I'm going to slack that out as well. This is what your grumble controller function should look like. Tim?
Why do we want a new resource?
Because this way we still get all of the API methods and everything with it. I mean, in Rails, you wouldn't want to like just create a new artist if that artist didn't inherit from active record base. If it didn't inherit from active record base, then you wouldn't be able to do .save, .delete, whatever you're going to do with that artist. So here, we want to later on be able to say like this.grumble.save or .remove or one of the other API methods. Does that make sense?
Yes, with resource you get all this help.
Exactly. Whereas without the resource, we could still, make something show up here, but it wouldn't actually interact with the API. And this provides a whole bunch of helper methods that let us do that. Okay, so got that. So this new page, it just creates a form that has a whole bunch of stuff on it. Let's see if that works. So far, so good. Okay, so the next step is for this form to actually create something. Right now, it calls this create method that we haven't defined yet. So that's what we need to do next is create a create method. So to do that, I'm going to do this. You can create methods in here the exact same way you would create variables. So if I do this dot create equals, here I'll make it alert something. Yo. Okay, so I've created a create function, and if you look in here, I have this ngClick that calls that create function. So now if I did everything right, when I go back here and click on create, it should alert yo at me, and it does. So far, so good. I don't actually want it to alert yo. I want it to, do something a little bit more substantial. What I want it to do is save the grumble. So this is where I'm going to use one of those API helper methods. I'm going to do this.grumble.$save. I think that's right. Let me double check. Yep. This.grumble.$save. So these API methods tend to start with a $sign, which is why this one does. They have no relation to jQuery. It's just they tend to start with a $sign. I believe that's because the class methods, well, let me double check this. I believe the class methods don't start with a $sign, whereas instance methods do start with a $sign. And I think it's just their way of keeping those separate. So if I look in here, so here's this guy. This is the instance that has a whole bunch of $sign methods. I'm sorry, that's tiny. Let me blow that up. And then this is the class. This is the instance. This is the class. And the class does not have $sign methods. So it's just a visual thing to help keep them separate. All right, I think this may actually just work by itself. Let's find out. So I'm going to say, I don't know, flugelhorn. I'll create that one. Now it doesn't show me anything, but first I just want to check the Rails console and see if I saw anything updated there. I'm going to check that out. It just inserted something into my database. I can see flugelhorn right here. So it just put it right into my database. If I go back to the main page, I should be able to see flugelhorn right there. So this is cool. We've just done our first create action with the database. It's still pretty hairy. It shouldn't be that you click the create button and nothing happens. That's sort of a bad user experience. But at least you can see that it's working. Sarah? Mm-hmm. Yep. This always exists inside a function. Every single JavaScript function has a this inside it. Whether or not you actually do anything with it is up to you, but everyone does have a this. If I console log this, I predict it's going to be the present instance of the Grumble new controller function. That's a mouthful. Let's see. I'm probably going. Oh, I'm not on the new page. There we go. Here it is. I think it's actually a function. Let me double check that. I could be wrong. Oh, no, it's a, you're right, it's an object. And so here's everything that we've defined in here. This.grumble shows it right there. This.create shows right there. And you can see that it is, it's a new instance of the Grumble new controller function. Magic. No, I mean, anytime you call a new controller, this is what's going on in app.js. Anytime you write controller, if you run controller as, anytime you write controller, it's creating a new instance of that controller. It's always going to create a new instance of that controller, whether or not you have controller as. All controller as does is take that instance and save it into some kind of a variable. So this is the name of the variable. So you're effectively doing, this is so long to say, var, you know what, I'm going to write it out. You're effectively doing var grumble new view model equals new grumble new controller. There we go. These two things combined are doing all of that. Without controller as, you would just be doing that. Controller as adds in the var at the beginning. So it's just a fancy way of creating this variable and making it available inside your view. So no, it's not actually magic, but there's just a lot of stuff going on under the hood. All right, so now we have a way of creating stuff. So that's pretty cool. Let's improve the UI a little bit. It would be nice if, say, when you create a new Grumble, then you get like redirected to the index or something other than you just sit there. So that's what we're going to do next. I think I may have lied. Oh, I lied. Well, but what would still be a vast improvement is if there was some way of getting to the new page from here. And there isn't. I have to go to the URL and type it in. So keeping in mind that this new, this thing is the state of Grumble new, let's say I go in here and I just put in a link to create a new Grumble. So button, actually no, I'm going to make it an anchor. Say what? Yeah, I know, but I'm just winging it. All right, so what's the attribute that I would use here to make a link to that new page? Not href. Yeah, I'll give you a hint. It's right here. It's the exact same thing. Data UI sref. And then what would I put inside the quotes? You can see it over here somewhere. Grumble new. That is exactly right. Grumble new. Okay, hey there is not good. Placeholder text. Create a Grumble. Refresh the page, and I get create a Grumble. And if you look really closely, you can see that it links to Grumble/new. So if I click on this, here I am on the page. Now I can make, I don't know, flugel, porn, redux, create it, go back here, and there it is. Well, bam. And I can go in here and see it up close if I really want to. So I think that's all we're going to do for creating for right now. So questions about that? Brendan?
So when we created in homework, did we have to match up the key value pairs with that data engine model from the form?
Data engine model.
Like model.title. Did we have to map that to the title? Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of magic.
Well, there is, but you mean like what?
Like title, colon.
Oh, and like where is that coming from, kind of thing? Yeah.
Like it knows.
Yeah, so this resource is actually a pretty bare resource. Really, all it has is just those API methods. But when we go in here into the new file, when we're doing .grumble.title, it's effectively adding a title property onto that resource that we've created. So by going in here, we've added this title property onto that resource. And so when we submit it, it submits that entire bundle. It's the resource plus everything that's been added onto it. Everything that's been added onto it is a title, an author name, a photo URL, all of these other things. So yeah, it is sort of magical in that it's just sort of creating these properties for you on the fly. It's also kind of weird because we're used to creating schema for things first, and then just like doing stuff that matches those schemas. Whereas here we're sort of doing it in reverse. It's like just taking whatever we throw at it and updating it appropriately. But you know, that's just sort of part of the. That's a feature, not a bug of Angular, is that it does that so easily, and it is a lot less work that you don't have to do. Remember, Angular's whole purpose is to make all of your logic sort of grounded in your view. The whole idea is that you sort of use HTML to structure your entire app, instead of a whole bunch of wonky JavaScript objects. Of course, we have a lot of wonky JavaScript objects, but if we were to make this a much bigger app, then you would see how there's going to be a lot more logic inside your view than inside the JavaScript itself. And so here we're effectively just defining the schema inside the view. That's sort of the magic of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you renamed one of those attributes and created a new one,
Yeah.
JSON as.
Sure, let's try it. How about wombat? That's a good idea. Never gets old. Okay, this is a wombat. Okay, now, for one thing, I get this. So I get a bad request. And if I look over here in Rails, I'm going to see shooby-dooby-dooby-doo, shooby-dooby-doo. Well, I can see, for one thing, that wombat got included in the stuff that was sent in. But I can also see parameter missing. So it didn't like the fact that I sent in wombat. That's weird. I sort of expected it to be.
You tried to add properties for title or something else. I think what it was it's an empty object with Rails 3 and nothing. You didn't put the other properties in the form. You have to fill out the form.
Okay. Well, no, I did. I put this as a wombat in here.
But yeah, try putting it in there in the title.
All right.
Is there a chance that this will be required in the Rails 3?
Let's see. Okay, so here we go. Now we have a wombat with, yeah, that's what it was. So there's strong params, I think this is it, is that there's strong params enabled in this Rails app that only allows, title and author URL and stuff. It definitely does not allow wombat. So wombat has been removed from this, and that's why it wasn't working. But now that I've included a title, now it's working okay. Yeah, wild, right?
But if you rename title, I guess we'll do it. If you rename title as wombat.
So here, I'll rename title to turtle.
Yeah.
And then I'll refresh this. Brendan. Should still be the same thing. It's going to grump at me because strong parameters has taken out this property called turtle, which it's like, that's not allowed. And so the result is that Rails is just left with this empty object right here. Yeah, Nigar.
Yeah, like a node serving as the API with a Mongo interface would actually make user value.
Yeah. Yeah, because Mongo has super flexible schema. So unless you put something in your Express app that says, hey, don't allow these parameters, then yeah, it probably would just create a new column, if you will, for Wombat. So that's something you need to be wary of when you're making a Mongo app. That's really nice in a lot of ways. It just sort of depends on what you want to do with your app. Other questions? We're right up against the end here. So just any other questions you have about this stuff? Well, actually, hold that thought. So let me talk about what's going on for the rest of the day. The rest of the day is going to be a lab. The lab is not working on Grumbler. It's working on WDI radio. So it's a lab, so we're calling it Radio Lab. And so if you guys listen to NPR, then you're going to appreciate that. But it's almost exactly the same thing. It's using the exact same concepts that we went over in class, just on a different application. You can see in here that there's all this edit, update, and destroy stuff down here that we didn't get to. But this is all you do. This is all stuff where we would just be asking you to go through the lesson plan yourselves. And so that's stuff that you can totally do during the lab as well. So that's going to be the rest of the day. Any questions about that or any of the content that we covered? I don't know.
Should we work on the lab alone in pairs?
Yeah, we really don't like it when people work in pairs. In fact, we pretty much never recommend any people work in pairs. Yeah, totally work in pairs. You're totally going to get more out of the experience, I think, when you work with someone else. There. I saw that. Anything?
I was just looking to see if the lab was
All right.
I have a question that probably doesn't matter, but put all the controllers and control as named in strings because the unification would screw it up. So when we reference it in the view as what's called in the controller as, how does that not screw up?
Well, so HTML doesn't get minified. But you can but odds are you're not going to minify your HTML. And if an HTML minifier did like change everything that you wrote, then it would make a really crappy web page. So HTML minifiers pretty much just get rid of spaces and tabs and stuff. Yeah. We're not actually minifying JavaScript here, but if you're making a production app, then you might be, which is why we're going to all this trouble to make sure all the dependencies are injected appropriately. Anything else? Okay, cool beans. Thank you, guys. I'll get the screencast up lickety-split, and then the lab will start at 2:30, I believe. I'll just put that up here to double check.